Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Security Guide TV. This is episode 3071 with my next guest, Mr. Greg Valentine. He's the Senior VP of Solutions Engineering for Industrial Defender. That's industrialdefender.com. Mr. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Today, we're going to talk about implementing INSM, that's Internal Network Security Monitoring with Industrial Defender. We talked briefly about the show, and I did some research on you guys. And when I saw OT, my ears perked up. This is a pet peeve of mine. I sought to help in cybersecurity, and I always thought, why are we messing with OT 10 years ago and putting it on the Internet of Things? Because the Internet of Things creates its own problem. And so these two things have kind of merged, is my understanding, and requires really a lot more security. It is safer in a way, in many ways. So let's talk about that. First, let's define internal network security monitoring for everybody that might not know. And by the way, OT means operational technology. This is what we use in physical plants, water, power, things like that. So give us a definition of that, Greg.
Well, that's exactly right. OT meaning power generation, transmission, distribution, but also oil refineries, chemical factories, water treatment plants, etc., wastewater. Now, INSM, internal network security monitoring, is just that. The definition is in the name. Somebody is able to monitor the network traffic inside of the facility in order to look for what's called anomalous activity. It could be straight up malicious activity. It could be a misconfigured device that's causing a lot of chatter on the network that it should not be causing. If you're not monitoring that network activity, then your plant may not be running as efficiently as it possibly could be, as an example.
Now, let me back up because my small brain doesn't quite get all these things sometimes. But back in the day, this wasn't happening because, in effect, OT was safer, air gap, nobody was worrying about that. Am I understanding that correctly? And now we have to get on it, right?
100% right. It's and companies, the vast majority, have always agreed and protected the perimeter. So the perimeter is solid, rock hard. Think of it like an egg, right? So getting through the shell of the egg, it's actually not too bad, but let's just say that it's a rock solid egg. But the center inside is mushy, gushy, right? So once you get past the shell, then it's pretty much open warfare inside of once you get past that perimeter. And that's the idea. That was a gap in typical OT cybersecurity monitoring. So now with INSM, people are actually monitoring the activity, what's happening inside of the plant, inside of the facility, so that you can discover and just detect activities that shouldn't be happening more quickly, sooner, so that you can mitigate them and have your plant running smoother and more securely.
So is this kind of new? When I say new in this business, that could be 10 years ago new, right?
Right.
And I know you guys cover a lot of infrastructure in North America, a vast majority of our physical structures that need protecting. Are there still places that don't quite get this part of it? Or they're fully on OT security still?
Yeah, there are, unfortunately. And this is unfortunately the nature of the beast in the OT. The old mantra, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, really applies in OT. If you have a process that's up and running and it's been running for 20, 40 years, why change it, right? That introduces inherent risk. Unfortunately, the world around it has changed. And so you need to be able to be aware. It's really just a visibility question. Can you monitor what's happening? And for the electric utility space, NERC CIP is now introducing CIP-015. And CIP-015, while not in effect yet, is absolutely positively coming down the path. It's coming. If you're a medium or high impact system with what's called ERC, or external routable connectivity, you are going to have to do INSM, period. But in reality, if you're an oil refinery or a chemical factory or a factory of any sort, it's a really good idea. Just because compliance is leading the way, that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. It's something that should be happening everywhere. It's just people, it takes time for it to take effect, basically.
Yeah, sure. I used to be a police officer way back in the day, and I'm all about compliance, right? I get that part. But
Yeah.
I will tell you this, the easiest way for me to implement compliance was not through demanding, but through asking, right? It's hard to explain that. How do you ask somebody into jail? But you can talk somebody into jail if if you give them all the facts to deal with. So when you put standards in place, a lot of people resist that. It's just kind of a natural thing. How do you overcome that? How do you get people to understand, listen, NERC is driving this and you got to do it? I suppose some people say, I'll get to it later.
Right. Well, and this is specific to NERC. The penalties are quite heinous, I guess is the word to look. I mean, pretty impactful. And people in the utility space have have been dealing with this for many, many years. So this is nothing new. They're just expanding this, and I think legitimately so. This has legitimately been a gap in a cybersecurity sense. Uh, and Honestly, if any company is using Industrial Defender, you already have CIP-15 covered. We have been doing INSM now for a decade, right? Now, whether or not you have it turned on with our product, that might be another question. But if you have Industrial Defender in place today, you have INSM and CIP-15 covered. It's just whether or not you have that facility turned on within our product.
Well, let's talk about the secret sauce. How does Industrial Defender support INSM?
Industrial Defender has two main components. We have a server, which we call our central manager. The central manager is where the database is. The data sits for compliance reporting, for um, uh, correlations, security events, etc. But the actual collection and monitoring is going to be done by our sensors, and our sensors are what collects the configuration details of all the devices in the OT space, but it also is monitoring the network. And the way that we monitor network is through passive monitoring. So we're watching the network traffic on the different network segments that our sensors are attached to. And our IDCs, or Industrial Defender Collectors, which is just what we call our sensors, also has an IDS built into it. And the IDS has baked into its technology the ability to look for anomalous traffic, looking for man in the middle attacks, and other attacks that can occur potentially within the OT space. We'll also tell you if devices are speaking to new devices that they've never spoken to before in the past year and a half, for example. That counts as anomalous traffic because it's unusual, and that is done by our sensors.
Now, how does this help? How does Industrial Defender help meet the NERC standards? Can you, how would I describe this? Can you set the standard to be local? So in my environment, I'm worried about these things, whereas in Los Angeles over here, I'm not worried about those things. Is there a way to configure it so you see your specific threats for your geographical area and you're also in compliance with NERC?
Yes, absolutely. So all of that data ends up in our central server, and we have the ability to apply what's called RBAC, role-based access control. So what you are able to see can be defined to your geographic area only, so you never see anything outside of your space. And what you're able to do, what you're able to configure within our application is also under control. Do you have full admin rights to be able to change everything? Or are you a read-only user, so you can only run reports and look at configuration data? And we have a few grades of privilege between read-only and admin as well. So
Now, how much of
you're
that is
absolutely
it?
right.
How much is that autonomous? So, when I ran security at the studios, my big problem was not teaching people to do something; it was sustaining it. Sustainability was key to all these things. So, how much automation is involved here? Where if something comes up and I'm in compliance and I need to change something for a security measure, how much help does Industrial Defender give the end user? Because in the end, it's about end user error usually on these things, right?
That's right. That's right. So the collection of device configuration details is completely automated in the sense that once you onboard the different devices you want to monitor, you walk away, and every single day we do a new data collection and we compare that collection with the baseline for that device, and we can let you know if any differences are have happened. Maybe a new patch got deployed, maybe an upgrade occurred, or maybe something more uh, evil has occurred, like a new account was created or an existing account was elevated to local admin privileges. Things that should not have happened normally occurred. We automate that and let you know. For the INSM element, it's very similar as well. So it's all fully automated once you tell our system what network segments you want to monitor. Then you can tweak and filter for specific types of events if you wish. So you can have us collect everything if you want, or you can narrow it down if you want to only look for bad things, basically. Or if you also want to look for unusual things, you can manipulate the aperture of what we're going to be collecting.
And then when we get an actionable item, how do you guys help implement that? Let's say somebody says, you know what, I'm not going to worry about my Apache thing. That was 15 years ago, and I had that as an actual case once, actually. Uh,
Yeah.
so you got to get that guy to push the button, right? So how do we merge those two things with the actionable items and actual action?
That's a good question. So again, remember this is an OT space. So Industrial Defender has taken a philosophical position to where we give you absolute visibility, but we don't make any changes to the endpoints themselves. So we will alert you when we see the change. And then if it was a bad change, we will actually highlight to say this specific thing was changed. A new account got created, like I just said earlier. So we would then go and remove that user account and use Industrial Defender to validate that that account was removed and you're back to where the baseline matches. So you can validate the remediation that needs to take place with our product.
Greg, I love the way this sounds. Are you unique in the space? I don't know as much about OT as I like to, but it sounds better to me than most systems I've heard about.
Well, there are competitors in the space, but not 100%, right? There in a Venn diagram world, there is some overlap with a few companies, but nobody really collects the rich data that we collect and holds on to that data. We keep that data for 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. It's completely up to the client to choose how long they want to keep that data so that you can do the compliance reporting that you need to. We also have been doing the INSM now for well over a decade. So nobody really out there can do the rich data collection combined with the INSM, combined with the compliance regulatory evidence generation because of that rich history that we maintain. So
You
no
know, I,
direct competitor. Really.
I love the way this sounds. It reminds me of a story when I was at Fox. My guard got an air conditioning alert. And if you don't know much about the broadcast industry, if you run too hot, everything goes kaboing. So the engineer ignored it. He said, "No, there's nothing wrong with that." They called me at home. I called the people. I said, "You got to get on this." They didn't. Guess what? X Files went off the air at $165,000 a minute. That was a bad day. Not for security though. Yeah, because security did what you're
Right.
talking about, which is we were alerted, we didn't ignore it, we tried to pass it on, and we tried to do an actionable item. So I like that endpoint you have there where, you're going to push this up to somebody and say, hey, hint, hint, you guys ought to do something about
Yeah.
this. But, in the end, it's up to them to do it. I mean, that's the only
100%.
way,
Each
only way you can do it.
process, each facility is completely different and unique. And if we start flipping switches, so to speak, closing ports on firewalls, etc., really, really, really bad things could potentially happen. And so that's not our point. The reason for our being is to raise awareness into their local unique environment so that they can discover these things as soon as they occur.
Greg Valentine, Senior VP Solutions Engineering, IndustrialDefender.com. Before I knew anything about you, when I heard the address, IndustrialDefender.com, I knew what you did. I got to say. And I've listened to 3,000 of these titles, right? So it really, I said, it's got to be OT. It's got to be. And I was right.
That's right.
And you were right by doing it. So it's great. So hats off to you for that. Episode 3071. I want you guys to listen to Greg Valentine. It is different from what I've heard in the past. And I think you guys ought to get on board, especially with this NERC compliance issue. Greg, thanks for coming on the show. Maybe next show we can do something about some war stories and success, right? What you stopped and what was coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Because
Yeah,
I know
discovered a few things over the years, yes.
yeah, and I know these things happen. And you don't hear about it too often, but our grid and our infrastructure is constantly under attack. And hats off to the people that defend it, including yourself. All right, my friend, good luck, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it.